would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is a, this is of course a.
大家发现了吗？以前不可一世、张口闭口就要教训全世界的美国顶级政客，现在怎么突然变得这么怂了？在一场极其罕见的顶级访谈中，面对美国到底会不会出兵保卫台湾这个灵魂拷问，在座的一位州长、一位大使和一位众议员竟然集体断片，支支吾吾地用各种外交辞令疯狂绕圈子，甚至尴尬到拿不回答假设性问题来当挡箭牌。更离谱的是，当聊到陷入泥潭的乌克兰局势时，这帮精英在定义不了胜利的情况下，竟然老脸一红，生硬地把黑锅直接甩给了中国。甚至在提到伊朗核问题时，连一句硬话都不敢说，满嘴都是要留缓冲余地。从当年的世界警察，到如今处处避重就轻、处处怕出事的战略说，2026年的美国政客到底在怕什么？是他们不想管，还是面对这种大趋势，他们真的已经管不起了？让我们来看看这段撕开华盛顿尴尬面具的访谈对话现场。
Of you, and Congressman, I'll start with you. Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is a, this is of course a very long-standing policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
Ambassador?
Well, I mean, obviously that's would be the president's prerogative as to how to deploy our military. I would just say that we have to deter and defend like we do here on the European continent, and most importantly, and I think one of the things that President Trump was able to accomplish by having NATO agree to 5% of GDP on defense and defense-related items is ultimately, that's now the international standard. That's the Koreans are planning to move out on that. We expect others in the Pacific to commit to that new global standard that we set at The Hague last year. But ultimately, sort of the plans to defend Taiwan and the president's trade space, I think for any administration, especially this administration, needs to be as broad as possible to manage that risk. And as a lawyer, I learned long ago not to play hypotheticals either.
I mean, if you talk about foreign policy, you're in the hypothetical business.
Yes.
Governor?
Contingency business.
Contingency business.
I guess I would just simply say that I think that Taiwan's independence, as I think Ukraine's independence, is just, and I think that it is it's in the strategic interest of the United States.
On Ukraine, what does victory look like?
Ambassador?
No, please. I'd love to hear your answer.
It is. The two that I am on the panel with are much more steeped in foreign policy than a governor is. But I do think that Ukraine's independence, keeping their land mass, and having the support of all the allies, I think is the goal from my vantage point. Go ahead, Ambassador. Do a better job.
I think, Congresswoman, I want to follow the order of protocol here.
Well, of course, there's no conversation about Ukraine that can happen without Ukraine, and so they, of course, lead in terms of setting their terms on this. But I think that overall, as a principle, we shouldn't reward imperialism, and I don't think that we should allow Russia to continue, or any nation to continue, violating a nation's sovereignty and to continue to be rewarded and whose main lesson and takeaway is that they will gain. And so what that looks like in the specifics, I think, is a deeper conversation. But on principle, I think that is what we should be pursuing.
Ambassador, if Ukraine cannot retake all occupied territory, should the U.S. still push them for negotiations?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I mean, Ukraine obviously is in the middle of an attritional war where in December, the Russians were willing to sacrifice 35,000 Russians, over 1,000 a day. In January, it was 30,000, so 8,000 a day killed or gravely wounded. And there seems to be no end in sight for their capacity to throw soldiers at the front, very similar to a lot of other Russian wars of the past. And you know, we're seeing how tough it is. And the Ukrainians have been brave. They continue to fight, you know, and be very innovative. You know, I was able to go there in November and not only go to Kyiv, like a lot of folks go, but go out to Kharkiv, to within, you know, less than 30 miles from the Russian border, and talk to the people that are fighting on the front line. And it was fascinating to hear their perspective and to learn sort of the lessons that are being there. But, you know, every single day that goes by, obviously there are small incremental gains that the Russians are picking up. And so this war has to end. This slaughter has to end. It is, it's almost incomprehensible, the loss of life and the suffering that the Ukrainians are going through, especially as Russia attacks, you know, their energy infrastructure. I mean, it is just, it is horrible what is happening. The global world needs to stand up. But you know, this war is being completely enabled by China. And China could call Vladimir Putin and end this war tomorrow and cut off his dual-purpose technologies that they're selling. China could stop buying Russian oil and gas. There are lots of opportunities for the world to put pressure on China. Any deal has, and this is something we agree on, has to be an agreement between not only the Russians, but the Ukrainians. And it has to be a deal that's acceptable to them. And, you know, my biggest fear is that the Ukrainians, I think, are willing to make a deal right now that's reasonable, that under the circumstances would be fair. There's really no fair deal here because, again, Russia invaded Ukraine and has been, executing this attritional war. But I just am not convinced that ultimately the Russians are ready to make a deal or ever will be able to make a deal. But, you know, I do pray for peace because this war needs to end. It's horrific. You know, we see it every day. And it has to end. And President Trump is going to use everything he possibly can to continue until it's either possible or impossible.
I think we will have time for a lot of questions from the floor. Maybe just one question on Iran. Congressman, I don't know if you want to start us off, but basically, would you support direct U.S. military strikes on nuclear facilities if diplomacy fails with Iran?
I mean, I think that is a dramatic escalation that no one in the world wants to see. Right now, what the Iranian regime is doing, particularly with respect to protesters, is a horrific slaughter of, some estimates have tens of thousands of people. Now, I think that jumping into strikes, I think that right now we have so much, to me, there's still so much runway, so much that we can do to avoid that scenario.
如果说以前的华盛顿是以霸道著称，那么在这段2026年的访谈影像里，我们看到的则是前所未有的心理溃败。这种从核心问题上的集体断片，到对中国不负责任的疯狂甩锅，完美宣示了什么是强弩之末的无奈。他们在台湾问题上的支支吾吾，绝不是什么高深的战略模糊，而是在认清现实后的某种本能恐惧，因为他们深知，在如今的硬实力对比下，再也无法维持那种绝对的区域压制。而在乌克兰局势上的推卸责任，更是暴露了他们在消耗战泥潭里的绝望，只能试图通过抹黑中国来维持最后一点可怜的道义遮羞布。我觉得这种国力的透支已经到了无法隐藏的地步，以至于他们甚至在面对伊朗时都显得如此底气不足，反复强调缓冲余地， 霸权的黄昏总是充满了这种滑稽的辩解。那个依靠强权和霸凌定义的旧时代已经一去不复返了。现在这个世界的大趋势已经清晰可见，这种文明权力的更迭是不以某些人的意志为转移的。这种从世界警察向避祸路人的心理转变，实际上是他们对自己掌控力彻底丧失的公开放弃。这种现象背后折射出的是西方社会深层次的焦虑，他们发现自己引以为傲的规则在真实的中国力量面前正变得一文不值。正如我们在这一系列社会观察中所揭示的那样，旧的世界格局正在坍塌，而新的大趋势正在向东方升起。这种时代的接力绝非偶然，而是由于一种更包容、更务实的文明逻辑正在赢得全球的认同。让我们继续保持这份冷静和自信，见证这场属于中国、属于未来的伟大飞跃。感谢大家的收看，我们下期见。